Hey everybody, thank you for joining me today. So with the time of the year coming, with Christmas or holiday cards coming up, I thought it was good to start to revisit embossing. So I'm showing you a couple of different embossing powders, containers. I got some of mine in little storage containers. And then we're going to be using Versamark and VersaFine Black Onyx ink. You need a heating tool. You're going to need some powder, whether it be the Embossing Buddy or the EK Success Tool. I have some coffee filters, and I'm going to show you how to use all of this to get a good embossing result. Okay, so we're going to use the Misty. If you have a stamping tool like the Misty or the Tim Holtz platform, I suggest using it if you're worried about getting good coverage as far as your ink. Because with the Versamark, it's clear, so it's hard to see if you've got it all or if you've covered the entire stamp. So if you're concerned about that, use a stamping tool. You can always stamp it twice. My ink pad is wet enough that I can stamp it once and I'm pretty good. So right now I treated the paper with the powder, so that way any of the oils from my fingers, it won't attract the embossing powder. So I'm taking this Nuvo Enchanted Gold embossing powder and I've poured it into the filter. And you use the coffee filters for containers, as catchers of your embossing powder, because it's easy to funnel it back in to the container that it was originally in when you don't have it in a separate storage container. And then the key with embossing is heating up your heating tool, okay? If you turn it on and immediately put it on your paper, you may get more warping than you would if you allowed it to heat up first, okay? And don't freak out. There will be some warping, okay? If it's warped too much, you just use something like foam tape or Fun Foam, something that would give you even coverage, and you would use that to attach it to your cards. Okay. So I wanted to show you, I was trying to get this particular piece of black cardstock that I had on my desk. I was trying to make sure to use my fingers so that you could see how the embossing powder would stick. With black paper, I find, especially when you're using white embossing powder, it tends to stick everywhere. The funny thing is, when I did this video, it turns out it didn't. Like, I really didn't use any powder. You saw me, I was touching the paper, but a lot of the embossing powder fell right off. There was a few spots, which is what I can show you here. When you don't use the static tool, you'll see more of that, where you have embossing powder sticking in places you don't want it. So that's why I always use the embossing powder, or the powder tool. Now, if you do find stuff or powder in areas where you don't want it, you can always use a brush, a dry brush, to take off all the stuff all the embossing powder that, obviously you're trying to get rid of. So once you've got that, I'm going to funnel it back in. And you'll see me using these a lot on this particular video. A lot of times I put my coffee filters up because we got a Keurig. So we didn't even really need coffee filters anymore. But thankfully, I've been watching a lot of AmyR videos on YouTube, and she always uses coffee filters, and they do help and they work. So if you don't have any type of storage system for your embossing powders, just go to the dollar store, get you some coffee filters, okay? So once again, heat tool, and you heat up the white embossing powder. It's really beautiful on the black cardstock. If you do use the powder on the black cardstock, once you let it cool off, then just take like a Swiffer cloth or a microfiber cloth and rub it on the paper to bring up the extra, or the yeah, the extra powder that's on the paper itself. Now, pigment inks. Everybody should love pigment inks, okay? Especially if you don't have Versamark or the clear sticky. If you have any type of pigment inks, you can use your embossing powders with them. Why? Because they stay wet longer than your dye ink. So I just stamped once using the VersaFine Black Onyx, and I took the clear embossing powder and went over the front of that stamped image. Now, there are some people who feel like the Versamark by itself is not dark enough or is not a rich, dark black. But what I like about using it is a lot of times I just want to make sure it's not going to smear on me. So the black, or yeah, the one stamp clear embossing powder, it just gives me a little bit of added protection, especially if I'm doing some quick watercoloring or stuff like that. Now, real quick, I'm trying to remember exactly. Yeah, on this one, I'm inking it up again using the Black Onyx. But this time, once I stamp it down, I wanted to show you the difference if you use black embossing powder instead of the clear. And what it does is, using the black embossing powder actually makes it a rich, dark black. You know what I mean? It like intensifies the black ink, if that makes sense. You'll see it here in a second. Now on this time, I'm using my container that the embossing powder comes in. I could have used the filter, but the space is wide enough that I could just use the container that I have my black embossing powder in. And then on here worked out perfectly, because you can see I didn't use the powder tool, and there was embossing powder all over the place. So with the black embossing powder, especially if you're doing it on white, I would definitely use your powder tool, because you don't want it to get all over the place. And I find a lot of times with the black embossing powder, it seems to cling everywhere. So after we got that heated up, I'm going to bring over the first one we did, which was the black ink with clear embossing powder. And then the second one is the black ink with black embossing powder. So you can see the different intensities between the two. And that's just two simple, you know, one clear powder, one dark powder. These are different containers that I got. I think the clear with the blue handles I got from online, and the green one I got a bunch of those from like the Dollar Tree or something like that. Okay, so I wanted to play a little bit more with the different embossing options. So I'm grabbing this one square piece of paper, and we're going to stamp the word thanks. And we're using the Versamark. And as I stamp it down, I'm just going to first start with the solid color. I'm going to do a solid rose gold, which is what this color is. And then I'm going to turn it around and do a solid color of this blue embossing powder that I happen to have. And then we're going to kind of play around some. So let me ink this up real quick. Put this down here on the bottom. We're going to do the blue real quick. And then once I get the extra powder off, we're going to go ahead and funnel that back into the container and then heat up those two. So you can get embossing powders in different thicknesses, in different colors. You can get the chunky, glitter, no glitter, more like your metals, your liquid platinums and golds and silver. there's so many options with the embossing powders, okay? I happen to like really any one. There's not one that I'm totally sold on where I only get that one. I do enjoy the Nuvo. I use probably the clear and the white the most from the Nuvo embossing powders. But on this one, let me show you. I just stamped the thanks in the clear, and all I'm doing is taking one small section of the word thanks, and I used a small little bit of the platinum, and then I'm grabbing my gold and putting some in the center, and then on the very end I'm going to take a little bit of the rose gold embossing powder I have and get that tea in that little bit. So what I just did was I used 3 different embossing powders, and so as not to waste a lot of the powder, I just used a small amount as I could, giving me 3 different colors. So it's going to go rose gold to regular gold to platinum, to the liquid platinum, and it turns out really cool. And you can do it all kinds of ways. The going sideways, the way that I did, you can do one color up at the top, one color on the bottom section of the word, and then that mix right there of the embossing powders you can put into a container if you don't want to lose it. You can use it on a project and mix it in together, which is what I do at the end of the video when I make the final card. So there's a lot of different things you can do. Ultimately at the end, I don't save this. I do wind up throwing it away because it's, like I said, it's not a whole lot of embossing powder, so I wasn't worried about it. Okay, so the next one, we're going to do it one more time. Ink it up, and on this one what I thought about doing was taking the Nuvo Enchanted Gold along the bottom, and then take the regular Ranger Gold and do that one along the top. So I'm just going to grab that real quick. Like I said, just a little bit of it. So when I heated up this one, on the video and in the photos, you don't see a drastically different look, but what it does do is if you tilt it in the light in the right way, the bottom part is a little bit darker and it's a little bit chunkier, so it gives it just a little added difference. I mean, really, you guys, if you've never heat embossed, you've got to try it. It's one of those high impact things that you can do to your card. It's magical to watch it happen. I mean, it's simple, just heat in this product and it melts and it just looks so awesome. Okay, we're gonna do it one more time. This one is more of a I guess a saying. It says you are amazing. I've treated the paper. We're going to ink it up with the Versamark and then stamp straight down and up. And then what I decided to do on this one is take the platinum again, the liquid platinum, and we're going to line it up on most of the word amazing, leaving a little bit of it on top of it without the liquid platinum. And then I'm going to grab my gold, which is my super fine gold from Ranger, and we're going to flick that on the upper part, so the you are so, and then part of the amazing, so it looks like it's two-toned. And the big thing that you always hear a lot of people talking about is don't overheat your embossing powder. You can see it. The way that I think it's easiest is to make sure that you put it on an angle, and then you can see how the liquid or the embossing powder is melting, and you just need it to melt as quick as possible depending on your heat tool. So if your heat tool gets super hot, then it's not going to take long for for everything to melt. If it doesn't and it takes a little bit longer, then just keep it moving so that way you don't melt it in some crazy way. Now, I wanted to do the two-tone one more time, and so I used the Versamark Black, not Versamark, the VersaFine Black Onyx, and I'm taking the rose gold embossing powder that I had, and I'm basically covering up the bottom portion of this particular stamp, and then on the top I was gonna do a third one, and then I wind up the gold, when it slid down the card, it touched all of the flower. I'm still gonna try and put a little liquid platinum there on the end. Maybe some of it might have grabbed it. You'll see in a little bit here once we get it inked up and heated up. Here we go. So now we're gonna, right now doing the video, of course, my heat tool is nice and warm, so it doesn't take long for any of this to melt. So once we go through that, we have the darker color on the bottom and then going up to the nice gold. And you can do this with, like I said, different colors. I have some blue embossing powders. I want to say I have a lot of different colors. And you can mix and match. You can blend and, do 3 colors on one stamp. There's a lot of different masking techniques and different things that you can do using the embossing. But I hope that what you guys learn or you get from this is the whole key to embossing. The part that I think really hurts a project is using that powder tool. Don't take it for granted. Grab it and use it. Trust me, you will feel much better and it will keep you more sane if you use the either the embossing buddy, the pillow looking one, or the one that what I have and used in this video, which is the EK Success Tool, I believe. Love it. Love it. I never emboss without it. I try not to. I really do. So thank you guys for joining me today. Here is the 4x4 card that I wind up making with the same stamp and the word thanks. At the end here, I'm going to have links to previous Technique Tuesday videos. And if you haven't subscribed, just click on my photo and subscribe to the channel. Thanks, you guys, and have a great day.